Hello, and thank you for joining us at Coalesce. My name is Sarah Leone, and I'm a customer support engineer at dbt Labs. I'll be hosting this session, which is entitled From 100 Spreadsheets to 100 Data Analysts, the story of dbt at Slido. We'll be joined by Daniela, Miko, and Andre from the Slido team. The team will take us through their journey from a small group with a dream of cultivating a data-informed culture within their spreadsheet-dependent startup to a 100-person data team deploying a full suite of tools, including dbt. Before handing it over to the team, I wanted to call out a few items. All chat conversations are taking place in the Coalesce dbt Slido channel in dbt Slack. If you're not part of the community already, you have time to join that now. Just go to getdbt.com/community and search for the Coalesce dbt Slido channel once you enter that space. We encourage you to ask other attendees questions, make comments, or react at any point in the channel. After the session, the speakers will be available in the Slack channel to answer your questions. However, we encourage you to ask those questions at any point during the session. I also wanted to call out that the team will be using their application, Slido, to do live polls during the session. If you'd like to take part in that, have a device that can read QR codes ready, or by going to slido.com and entering the code DBT. With that, let's get started. Over to you, Daniela.
Thank you, Sarah. And actually, thanks everyone for joining us today. As Sarah mentioned, we'll be speaking about the story of dbt at Slido and our journey from 100 spreadsheets to 100 analysts. I'm Daniela, and I work as a data engineer in Slido, and I'm here today with my two colleagues, Michal and Andre. Yeah, I'm sorry. Michal is working as an analytics engineer, and Andre is here working as in Slido as data engineer. Now, before we begin, I would like to ask you a little bit more about you. So if you could please go to slido.com and enter the QR code DBT. Alternatively, you can also use the link that Sarah shared in Slack, or you can also scan the QR code on the right-hand side to join using the QR code. And we have a question for you, actually. We would like to know, what is the current stage of your data infrastructure? Are you in the dbt age, a spreadsheet age, or data warehouse age? So yeah, let's wait until some votes will come up. Michal, do you remember those times when we were in the spreadsheet age?
Unfortunately, it still haunts me in my dreams, I think. However, it's been a while, so finally I can get some good sleeps overnight. There's been some tough times back then.
Yeah, I see that votes are coming. We have a pretty strong dbt community, of course, online. For those who are in the spreadsheet age, I can relate to you, Michal, but also to all of you. I believe that we can give you a little bit of during these times. For those who are in the data warehouse age, actually, if you are thinking about switching to dbt, we will explain what impact dbt had in our organization. And for those who are in the dbt age, we've prepared, I believe, pretty interesting demo how you can leverage an open source tooling that we built along the way. So I hope all of you will find something to relate during the talk. Go directly into it. And please keep your phones ready. We'll have another poll in a couple of minutes. Now, just to give you a little bit of background about Slido. Slido is an audience interaction platform that helps leaders to better interact with their employees. With Slido, it's possible to crowdsource questions that drive meaningful conversations, but also it's possible to run live polls like the one that you have seen a minute before to capture valuable feedback and insights. Slido was founded 9 years ago, and last year we were acquired by Cisco. And during all these times, during all these 9 years, we've seen quite rapid growth. Last year, we have crossed the milestone of 1 million events that have used Slido to create better interactions. And this year, actually, we have crossed another 1.5 million events that have already used we had a chance to work with clients and conferences like South by Southwest, Web Summit, Pulse, Money 2020. And from the conferences, then Slido made its way to the companies and meeting rooms and is now used at, I believe, at least 40 Fortune 100 companies. But of course, as you can imagine, it wasn't all about sunshine and rainbows. Of course, there were many challenges along the way. But today, we are here to speak about the one we had as data team. Back in 2018, as Sarah mentioned, we practically didn't have any data analytics infrastructure, and all reporting sat in Google spreadsheets. In practice, it meant that there was a ton of tasks done manually. Just to give you an example, to be able to work with data, we had to manually extract data from our CRM every Sunday. Well, maybe you're asking why Sunday, because actually we have our Monday morning meetings every Monday, so we needed to have a fresh data there. But also, actually, it wasn't even possible to download bigger batches back then. And another example was, for example, a tedious task of tracking ending subscriptions, where our ending customers to know like which customers are ending, not just for the calculation of retention numbers, but also actually for running a continuous business with these clients. And yeah, of course, we had to do all this manually. So these are just two examples, but when I'm reflecting on these, I can believe that we were able to survive those times. Anyway, as you can imagine, we knew that something has to change. We knew that in order to improve our data game, we want to build a data-informed culture. That was also at a time when our current head of data, Marek, joined the team, and we were given a shoestring budget of $500 per month. Now, get ready. Here is another question for you. What would you do if you were given a task like this? Would you start crying? Or would you take a short sabbatical? Or would you roll up your sleeves and actually start and dive into the work? Now, I hope that you have your phones ready and you can start voting. How about you, Andrei? What would you do?
Well, I don't know. In this pre-Christmas time, I'm very tempted into saying that I would take at least 1 month sabbatical maybe, so that I can start working after Christmas in January. So I guess I vote for a sabbatical, but only for 1 month.
And Andrei, if it was, summer, would there be also a 1 month sabbatical?
In summer is not much better actually, but if I remember it correctly, I believe we did the very first data warehouse implementation during the summer. So I guess I'd roll up my sleeves if it was summer.
Yeah, this is actually a funny slide, but I believe that everyone would eventually accept the challenge. So let's have a look at what was our answer. Our solution at that time was to build a pretty standard ETL pipeline based on AWS Athena, orchestrated by Apache Airflow and visualized by an open source tool called Superset. As there was not much Athena specific tooling around at the time, we built also an in-house tool for management of materialized views, testing the results, and we had a tool that ensured that the test coverage of our materialized views, how we call them, or models, doesn't decrease over time. And if you're asking what was the distribution of cost of those $500, here's a rough rundown of costs. $150 for replica of production database, $200 for storage and query service, $100 for servers for Apache Airflow and Superset, and $50 for other miscellaneous things. So that was it. We finally had something in our hands. We had a place where we could scale our data. And since Superset was actually an open source platform, we had a chance to provide data to the whole Slido team. So you would say it's great, pretty great, right? Like compared to the spreadsheet era. But as you can imagine, and although this was way better than what we had before, some problems came along the way. And it was, again, there were some challenges. So let me give you a few examples. First of all, because it wasn't simply possible to set up a staging environment, we were quite often encountering fails in production. These were happening because of basically two reasons. First of all, we were not able to locally test the changes that we were introducing to warehouse, and all changes were pushed directly to production. So if we made a mistake, it was there. And another thing that happened quite often was that downloaded or extracted data that were corrupted to the warehouse, it would break during the nightly jobs when it was refreshing. So as a result of these fails, our CEO, but also other colleagues, were not getting the fresh data digest the following morning. And even though he was very nice and not making a big deal of it, like you don't want your CEO to be the alerting tool you have in place. So that was the first one. Secondly, another set of issues came along with documentation. We wanted to share the knowledge, of course, that we've acquired within the team, but also with the rest of the company. But it was difficult to keep it up to date and scale when it was separated from the code itself. And it was necessary to copy paste all the information on multiple places. It wasn't version controlled and it wasn't reviewed. We were not able to make sure that it's always accurate and updated. And last but not least, we were missing visibility where and how our data used, which often led to broken dashboards. For example, upon a change in a table, there was no scalable way of knowing that basically some chart that is dependent on this data set needs to be updated. And again, we were only able to find these manually, or some colleague had to contact us that something is broken. So it was not scalable at all. But during all this time, we have been keeping an eye on dbt, as it seemed like an answer to most of these troubles. But using it with AWS Athena was not possible for quite some time. But then with the introduction of externally provided adapters, there was a little reason why not to switch. So we actually did. It's today almost 8 months ago. And now I would like to also walk you through the impact it had on our data team and analytics infrastructure here in Slido. First of all, those fails in productions were addressed thanks to staging environments. Running dbt locally to separate testing schemas enables creation of this staging environment where we can basically very safely fail and run standardized data tests. Thanks to this, we have a higher reliability and the errors were reduced to minimum. Also, the great benefit is data warehouse is much more stable. There is almost a never downtime when the data would be corrupted. At worst, we have stale data from yesterday, but it's not so bad in our case. Another set of issues that I've mentioned was documentation. Now with dbt and like when the documentation sits right next to the model itself, and also is version controlled and can be reviewed along the pull requests and the changes you are introducing to the model, but also thanks to Jinja templating and the ability to reference columns on multiple places, it's basically just much easier to keep it up to date and like available for everyone. Plus, we were able to make sure that our new columns that are undocumented or untested are automatically reported, and also to push these documented columns to Superset, our visualization tool. These are the toolings that my colleagues will showcase in a minute. Now, with the better documentation, people are less afraid to work with data, which is great. And last but not least, broken dashboards that I mentioned, thanks to dbt exposures and also internal developed data lineage tools, these superset dashboards are now put into dbt docs as exposures with underlying dbt models referenced. So now we have a better visibility where our data are used, and we can easily check when model is updated if we need to change also something in the visualization layer. Now, I would like to give a word to my colleague Andrei, who will show you how you can improve the coverage of your documentation, and we'll walk you through this part.
Okay, so having the documentation finally in one place with the actual queries, we also wanted to have more visibility in what is actually covered and what is not. And for this, we created a Python-based package called dbt-coverage. And the package can basically compute the documentation and test coverage of the individual columns in your dbt. So without further ado, let's take a look how it actually works. All right. So here I have the sample project that maybe most of you know. It's called the Jaffa Shop. This is from the dbt. It's provided by dbt. And I have the Python package installed. So let's take a look how we can do it. First of all, we have to materialize the individual models, which is done by dbt run. When the models are created, we need to generate the documentation. And once this is done, you can see that there were some files generated. These are standard dbt files that basically we use inside the project, and we can compute the coverage from them. So let's take a look how it works. We can run dbt-coverage script, and let's first compute documentation coverage for this project. So let's run dbt-coverage compute, and we can see that, yeah, it did something, and then it printed out this nice table telling you how many columns do you actually have covered in your dbt project. We can see that the customers table, for example, is covered. 6 out of 7 columns in the table are covered, but for example, some payments, raw payments, are not covered at all. But since it's very hard to actually create some documentation at once, to document your whole project at once, we also wanted to ensure that the tool gives you the possibility to continuously improve. And for this, we can see this by, for example, modifying the customer's query. We can, for example, add a new column. Let's imagine we need a new column here, and when we add this, let's hit dbt run, and let's say we forget about the documentation. We just added it, and the documentation didn't come up to our minds. So yeah, we materialize the model, then we run the dbt docs generate. Documentation is generated, but the new column is basically missing. Now, second time, let's compute the coverage, and let's see if anything changes. We can put it inside another file, not coverage.json, but coverage after JSON. And then we can see that the customers table has actually dropped in coverage. It was 7 out of 8, but now it's 6 out of 8. And what the tool gives you is another command, the dbt-coverage compare. And you can compare the coverage after the changes you made with the coverage before you made the changes. Now, let's hit run, and you can see that this is like a standard view in many coverage projects. It tells you that there is a drop in the coverage. There is actually no tables have changed, but 1 column was added, and it is actually a missed column. But also from this summary, it would be pretty hard to find what is the column that you missed. And that's why we also print you the column that you forgot to document. We can see it was non-existent before, and now it's uncovered, so it's a new miss. And this is what we want to report and what we want to avoid. Normally, this is something you could do on your pull request pipeline. You can actually, by using this tool, you can make it much harder or almost impossible for anyone to merge anything without the documentation. And since the documentation is not decreasing, it's either staying on the same level or improving, and this way you can hopefully slowly get to perfection. All right, so we saw this, and the best part is, and you already saw it in the Slack, that this is open source and should work on your project, hopefully. We will be very happy if you give it a try, and let us know in the Slack or anywhere if you like it or not. We'll be happy if it serves you the same way as it served us. And now over to Michal for the second tool.
Thank you, Andre. As you've heard already, we are using Superset as our visualization layer, and we wanted to make sure that dbt and Superset communicate with each other well. And that actually made life to dbt-superset-lineage. It's a package that does two things. Firstly, we wanted to push column descriptions from dbt docs to Superset to enable our end users to see those descriptions directly when creating charts. And secondly, we wanted to include Superset dashboards to data lineage in dbt docs to avoid those broken dashboards. And if we make any mistakes, just to make sure that we can easily see where like deprecated column or deprecated table made that impact. How does it actually work behind the scenes? So similar to dbt-coverage, dbt-superset-lineage is a CLI application. So it works in command line interface, and it leverages three things. Firstly, manifest.json. That is a special JSON file that contains all the information about your dbt project, and it's generated every time you hit dbt compile. That is also part of dbt run or dbt docs generate. Secondly, dbt exposures, which is a tool that is specifically designed by dbt and is part of dbt to define downstream dependencies of your dbt project. And lastly, of course, we use Superset API. Enough talking. Let me show you how it works in practice. Coming to a similar setup that Andre just showed a couple of minutes ago, I have a Jaffle Shop dbt project open. And in particular, I'm looking at the customers table, similarly as Andre. And as he showed you, there are a couple of columns that are documented. As well as I have the customers tables here, I have that table in Superset. And what I'd like to do, I would like to take the documented columns from dbt and put them here into Superset. How do I do that? So provided that I have the dbt-superset-lineage package already installed, and also that I have the access tokens saved in my global variables, I can easily type dbt-superset-lineage. And what I want to do, I want to push descriptions. And the only last thing that I want to put there is the link to my superset. When I run that, it takes a couple of seconds to contact the API, all done. Let's check it's actually there. So when I click on the customers table in Superset, I want to create a new chart, and just take an example, I want to create a new KPI. So let's say I want to see how many customers we have. So I create a new, let's put here the metric here. I want to see how many of them. And then when I click on columns, I can see customer ID, and right next to it, there's a little eye icon. And when I hover over it, there's a description. This is a unique identifier for a customer. Ideal. That's exactly what I want. Just click on it. I know what I'm doing. I know it's safe. So I can also save the chart and name it customers, and just save and go to dashboard. And now the chart was automatically added to the dashboard. Amazing. So I use the descriptions that are in dbt docs directly in Superset to create a chart. But what about the other way around? I have a Superset dashboard, and I want to make sure that this one is reflected with the links to customers table directly in dbt docs. I can head back to command line and use a similar command. I write dbt-superset-lineage. But this time, I want to pull dashboards. I'll just give it the link to my superset, wait for it to run. And it already told me that it was transferred to a YAML file under models exposures. I can't see anything. However, if I just click again, it opens up. If I open the file, there's a customer dashboard on this particular link with the reference to the customers table. That's great, but how does it look in dbt docs on production? I can simply generate the docs. And when it's done, I can serve them on an available port. This opens dbt docs, running locally. And when I go to Java Shop, models, customers, under referenced by, there's the exposures part, and I can see the customer dashboard is the one that it has this reference. And when I open it up, it has a separate page with a direct link to this exposure. So I can even see which dashboard is referenced by that. Amazing. And since it's an open source project similar to dbt-coverage, you can play around and hopefully also share some feedback with us. Thanks a lot, and back to you, Daniela.
Thank you, guys. I hope that some of you will actually be able to leverage some of these in your data stack. So now let's just wrap it up, and yeah, some final thoughts from me. Even though we are only on the midway through our journey from 100 spreadsheets to 100 analysts, there are some lessons learned that we would like to share. dbt is a major framework for analytics engineers. Thanks to its adapters, even a non-standardized processing solution, Athena, can be supported and further expanded upon. Second of all, obviously, automation is the best way to reduce human error during those demos that you've just seen. And even like the best ones might forget about something, but automated tools like this one can make automated checks for them. And the most important one, a staging environment is indispensable for analytics engineers, and analytics engineer can work without it. We have learned it on our skin. We believe that we are heading to a future where everyone will need to analyze data, that everyone will need to be a data analyst, and we will actually have those 100 analysts. And there is a long journey ahead of us with more data education and data democratization at a foundation thanks to dbt. So thank you for that.